Welcome to the Broker Growth Accelerator, where we discuss how real estate brokers can accelerate their growth by improving their agent recruiting and retention. I'm your host, Jim Turner, and today we'll discuss growth tactics with our special guest, who is a subject matter expert in the industry. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Jim Turner, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Brokerkit, and I'll be your host today. Today on the show, we're really excited to have Dean Cottrill from T360, an experienced vet in the real estate recruiting space. Dean, welcome to the Broker Growth Accelerator.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Dean, you have a long, illustrious career in real estate, but tell me, how long have you been in the business, and how did you get into kind of the world of real estate, and then to the consulting side, helping real estate brokerages grow?
You bet. So I started off out of college. I grew up in Pittsburgh, went through a school in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, came out with an accounting degree, and moved down to Washington, D.C. for an accounting position. And I realized accounting wasn't my future. So I decided to get into investment properties. This was 1989. And then I went to a night class, community college, get a real estate license, because back in 1989 and 1990, a little different world than it is today. And so
I can't understand why real estate investing would be a little more fun than being an accountant, though. Call me a little biased, but that sounds a little more fun to me.
A little bit. So I started going to the courthouse steps and buying homes at auction and things like that. I really didn't have two nickels to rub together at the time. I just got out of college, but I found people who had money, was able to put transactions together, realized the real estate license would be very advantageous to that. So I ended up getting a license. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I said, let me just make a career out of this. I went through CRS, GRI, a lot of different designations to learn the business. I was 23 when I started out, 22, 23. And so I did that for 8 years, very successfully, grew a business, was a very strong listing agent, grew into a very strong listing agent, and decided when my daughter was born, who's now 27, that I wanted to pivot. And so I ended up moving into leadership roles. So I managed offices for two of the largest independent brokerages in the US at the time. It was Jim Weichert's Weichert Realtors. I was there about 3 years. And then I moved to Wes Foster's company, Long and Foster. And these were mid-Atlantic companies basically at the time, and learned a lot in that process. I took my Long and Foster office from 20 agents to over 100, and from a loss to over $1 million in profit in 3 years. I did that all through recruiting, which is perfect for this podcast. So when I went through a process of learning from a consultant how to go through our interview process, I recruited 46 agents my next year to a 50-50 split with all the competitors that, most of the competitors that are into space today, very similar to what we had at the time. And so that then launched me off to NRT. I ended up running real estate companies for Anywhere Advisors, which used to be called Realogy and NRT. And I started off in the Baltimore company, and then I moved to the Mid-Atlantic, which is roughly 30 offices, 2,300 agents. And at the end of a 10-year run, I ended up with NRT. I ran the East Coast from Georgia up through Delaware. It was 4,000 agent operation. We did about $10 billion in sales. Had a resort rental division with about 3,000 properties, property management. We had a commercial brokerage, and we did mortgage, title, warranty, and insurance. That I did for a decade. And then I moved up 6 years ago, decided I wanted to change, pivot. I went over and talked to Stefan Swanpool and Jack Miller and start running the brokerage and team consulting division for T360. So for the last 6 years, I've been working with broker owners from around North America and supporting them, and teams. We have some large teams that really are organizations within themselves. And we support them in running more efficient, more profitable businesses.
Well, we are the Broker Growth Accelerator, and Dean, it sounds like you have some great experience for our listeners to tap into on how to grow their brokerages. So excellent. So as you know, this podcast, for you and the listeners, is really more focused on how to grow a brokerage via the talent funnel. So every brokerage, just like really any business, there's two primary funnels in the business: the sales funnel, the talent funnel. Most of the folks in real estate who end up in a leadership role or an owner role within a brokerage started in sales, right? Yep. And so they know it well. They tend to have, kind of fairly mature systems, processes in place. around the sales, KPIs, how to coach agents. They spend their days doing that. But the talent funnel, we believe, is equally, if not more important, because that's what's going to help you scale your business, really, is bringing in kind of talent so that, you're not the one that's out there selling all the time, right? And you can start to be, working on the business versus in the business.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the focus for today. And I know you have kind of like a framework that you've put in place on how to grow brokerages. I mean, we usually, with our guests, start at the top of the funnel, work down on kind of what's working for you. But I know you've put a little more thought into it and created a kind of a framework because you're working with brokers on that. Yep. So maybe let's use that to guide our talk here on what that framework is and progress through that. So I'll kind of hand it over to you to kind of kick that off.
Awesome. Yeah, this is something for the listener. We've actually put hundreds of teams and brokerages through this process. And many of them come to us, Jim, and say, you know what, let's recruit. I want to recruit. I want to be successful in recruiting, right? Top of funnel, right down through. And there are some steps prior to that really are helpful. So when you get to the recruiting phase, you're able to really kill it and pin your ears back and just run. So I'm going to lay out for you, it's 10 steps that we take brokerages and large teams through. We call it our Fellows program, and we break it into 3 specific areas. One is foundational. First off, you really have to foundationally know your business, know your market, know your competitors, and we're going to talk about specifically those 3 areas. Then you have 4 areas of growth, which are tied right to recruiting, and we'll get into that specifically. And there's 3 areas of scaling your business to expand it and grow. And like you said, Jim, it's so true. So many broker owners, so many team leaders who we talk to are just exceptional entrepreneurs, exceptional business people, are just doing very well, but they were never in that leadership C-level role of running a business. They're great, dynamic in the market, selling, things like that. But when you move into this chair, that's where some friction starts happening, because it's just something there's more things going on. Not that someone's not savvy, smart, can't figure it out. But what we say is this process I'll lay out for everybody. This is going to fast forward it for about a year process, where it usually will take 3 to 5 years, depending on the entrepreneur, depending on the executive. So the first steps on this is we encourage an audit of your business. And when I say this to everybody who's watching this is whether you work with us or whether you do this on your own. I encourage you, these are the steps you should go through to grow your business. First off, audit your business. Financially, 24-month, you should always look at a 24-month performance of your business, all your financials, all your performance metrics. There are 7 key areas in the business of running a brokerage. You have to hone in on those 7 key areas. Number 1, Jim, you're going to love this, is recruiting. It's agent growth. Agents, that is number 1. I could stop and forget the other 6, because frankly, number 1 will take care of the other 6. That said, you need to be aware of these other things, because there's so many rabbit holes that broker owners can run down and get lost in for time and money and energy. So these 7 areas are the best return for your time, your money, and your energy. All right. And the audit is where you really audit those areas. So it's agent count, it's unit count. How are you performing on unit count? You want to know that year over year for your own business, but also for your market. Are you performing better or worse than the market? Same thing in agent count. Agent count for your local association, whatever the metric might be, it's gone up and you've gone down, or it's gone down and you've gone up. That means you're capturing more. So you have to keep an eye on those things. Agents, units, your price point. What is your average price point? You have some control over that. You can pinpoint higher price markets, go after it. The commission you're earning on each of the sales. We encourage you, because of in the U.S., because of the current compensation lawsuits pending, you really break out your numbers on both list side and buy side commissions, and you evaluate your buy side, your list side units, and see exactly how much you're making on each one of those sides. All right. So agents, units, sales price, average sales price, the commission you're earning on each one of those sides. We're going to also talk about the expenses. What are your expenses? We encourage you to break it into 6 categories. Most people use QuickBooks, and QuickBooks goes to an alphabetical order. I smile when I say this. I say this with humor. You're not running a Sesame Street business. You're running a business. So you want to bucket your expenses into 6 key areas. And then from there, we go company dollar percentage. What are you retaining after you brought in all that gross commission? You pay your agents. What do you have left? to go towards your profit, go to your expenses and profitability. And then the last one is your return on revenue. What's your bottom line profit as a percentage of your total? And that'll give you a good metric to know how you're performing. So those 7 key areas, that's foundational. That's the first step. It's audit of the business. Then we encourage you to then do a deep dive. Like we have organizations, Jim, who come to us say, I want to expand into this new market. Or we have people come to us from outside the US, for example, and say, hey, I want to get into the US market. So one of the first things we'll do in this process is they do a competitive assessment. What does that competitive landscape look like? Who are your competitors? What is their offer proposition? What is their value proposition? And how you stack up? What does that look like for you to enter and penetrate that market? So for those that are currently doing business, we encourage you to do this on a yearly basis. You do a deep SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for your organization along with your competitors. All right, that's the second phase. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, back to the kind of the KPIs. I mean, you kind of walked through the things that you should be in your scorecard and that you're managing. What about, I mean, once I get them in there, really to assess where they need to focus, they need to probably have benchmarks.
Yeah.
I mean, are there any public resources that are benchmarks for those? What are the best ways? I mean, is that something I'm assuming you guys have from just dealing with people? What are the best way to figure out where they should be on those things?
Yeah, that's something, because we're constantly doing these evaluations and these audits. We call them business audits. We have an annual business review document that we use. So we're able to compile whether you're a team, whether a teamridge. Teamridges are teams that are brokerages or brokerages, no matter what category. You're going to have different benchmarks. You want to, as a percentage, net growth, for example, you want to be over 10%, under 10% net growth on agent count, as an example, is red. We do red, yellow, green. 10 to 20 is going to be yellow, and above 20% is green. That's going to be kind of across some of those other areas, but they're all return on revenue. For example, for a team, return on revenue benchmark is much different than a brokerage. Brokerages are much more, they're thinner margins. Because of the way the dynamic is in our industry. So in there with brokerages, 8% or higher is green, 4 to 8 is yellow, under 4% as a return on revenue, meaning bottom line profit as a percentage of the total revenue that's been generated is going to be in the red. So that's going to be, in teams will be over 20%. That's actually under 20 is red, and then you go yellow and green with teams. Yeah, there's definitely variances in benchmarks in those key areas. And there's no, I think, NAR comes out, National Association of Realtors comes out, and they have some statistics they do every year. They do questionnaires for public. There's some good information in there, but nothing specific to, and that's one of the challenges, frankly, broker owners have, is they can't walk down the street and talk to their competitor and say, hey, what are you doing? What's working? So that's one of the benefits of having an organization like T3, that we can come in and support that discussion.
Yep. And I think some MLS data sources like our partner Realytics or Brokermetrics, and they're going to have some of those, but not all of them, right? Like a lot of those are not going to be publicly available.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So that's the audit. The competitive assessment is the second step in that phase. And the third is what we call, and this is very interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs in our space are not thinking about an end state of their business. They're so busy doing the hand-to-hand combat of running their day-to-day operation that the vision of the end state, and let me just do a real quick outside comparison. Somebody who goes, Jim, you guys in the tech space, for example, Brokerkit, or somebody else, or somebody that goes to Wall Street or private equity and says, hey, I've got a business idea. I've already got this humming. I've got the technology put in place. I'm looking for investors. And here's the playbook. We want to build this, grow this, and we want to sell this and exit. We want to go public or whatever it might be, right? It's kind of laid out, right? Most entrepreneurs in the real estate space, very few have that played out, thought out, given any thought to this. So with that, one of the things that we do in the foundation steps is let's create a clear vision, because if we don't know where we're going, we don't know where we're going to get there. Right. So where are you going? And it's called strategic intent. There's a great Harvard Business Review article on strategic intent. We encourage our clients to read it. And then we work through a process of creating a vision of your end state of your business. There's 4 areas for strategic intent. It could be financial, and most people it's financial. I want to take my business from here to here. I want to be able to liquidate it, sell it, move on for my family's best sake, or for this reason or that reason. It could be independent. I'm an independent thinker. I do things independently. I like the way I do it. I do it well. I'm a game changer. I'm changing the game All right. And the other one is legacy. I'm building this up to leave it to my son, my daughter, or somebody as a legacy. And many times we see people that have two different components. I'm a legacy and it's financial. I want to build it up to be something of financial good place. And then I'm going to leave it for somebody in my family or something like that. So from that, create that vision, the reasons, the why, and then create a timeline. What is the timeline that I want to get there? And then we break that into milestones. And then the first milestone, which is right in front of us, like 2023, for example, what is your projects that you have in place to get your business going in a trajectory like recruiting? What's your growth idea? That's a project. Project one in my projects is going to be recruiting. Recruiting should be project one. That's where you utilize great resources like Brokerkit, like Realytics, and you say, you know what, I'm going to hone in on this. I'm going to focus this. I'm going to put money and time and energy in this area. And as I shared earlier, that's the number one place for you to get the highest reward for your time, money, and energy is adding productive agents. And most people say, you know what, I'm going off on a little tangent here on the recruiting piece. Some people get into their own way. They put bar doors on the front door, say, you know what, I think I can decide who's really successful and who's not in the interview process. Mm-hmm. And you know, I've interviewed thousands and recruited, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I can tell you, I've been surprised. So what I say is put people on your treadmill, your office, your company. It runs at a current speed. Some of your guys' companies run at a 4-minute mile. Some run at a 12-minute mile. Some run at a 20-minute mile. Whatever the speed is, whatever that is for you. Mostly for me, it was ethical, professional, and there's a minimum standard, whatever that is for you in your market. And if you did that ethically and professionally, I'm okay with you being there. You don't have to do 1,000 units yourself. I'm okay if you did this many units or something like that. And people surprise you. So I would bring them on, put them on the treadmill. And if they don't perform, you move them off. It's an easier thing to move them off than not bring them in the beginning. And the other thing is, you know, like a BD or a BJ, for example, before Jim or before Dean, these individuals never worked with us before or your organizations. And you have the ability to impact their lives and help them and support them be successful. So realize that. That's the first 3 steps. I'm going to take a breath, see if you have any questions, Jim, anything else you want to highlight that we talked about or say.
No, there was one thing in particular that stood out that you said, which was the growth. I mean, this is all about brokerage growth. And you said, I think you consider it kind of green if they're 20% or above. Did I get that right? And should anybody who's growing less than 20% be thinking, wow, I need to take corrective action? And how does that relate to benchmarks? Is that the average? How does that stack up to other brokerages out there? Is that kind of the average? Is that like 50th percentile? Is that a higher?
There's so many variables, but that's a net percentage growth to think about. But we also dive into actual numbers. So that's one benchmark we look at as a high level, like a 5,000 foot view. But you really want to dive in because some markets are limited by agent count. Right. So we always want to know what's your agent count in your market. That plays into this equation as well. You also model. You might have a model that is a low fee, low cap, transaction fee model, things like that. And their recruiting numbers should be higher as a percentage compared to more of the, the traditional brokers. I use air quotes there because what's traditional these days, but the idea of having a compensation structure, more of a value offer compared to in some of these models, all different models have different value offers, value props, and looking and evaluating those. But that said, if you're recruiting 2 people a month to a traditional model and the population is this and your net growth is 10, 12, 15%, that's okay performance. In my book. I used to, when I ran the Mid-Atlantic, for example, if an agent in the Coldwell Banker office, a manager in my Coldwell Banker office wasn't recruiting at least 18 people, I'd put them on a performance improvement plan. That was like the line that if you can't attract talent, at least 1.5 recruits on average per month, then that's not enough focus. You're not putting enough energy and focus in that area. And really the target was 24 in a year, 24 recruits coming in, having net growth, net gains. We also, and this is one of the big things most broker owners and team leaders lose out or don't focus on is what's called a churn rate. And that's another thing. I didn't mention that, but that's a benchmark. If you have a churn rate, meaning a disassociation rate. So if you have 100 agents and you lose 20 in a year, that's a 20% churn rate or a disassociation rate. That is high. That is something that really you have to look and say, okay, what's going on in there. There seems to be a disconnect between leadership and the agent population. Maybe it's culture, maybe it's something this or that, but it needs to be looked at. If you're running in the teens, that's in the yellow. If you're under 10%, 9, 8, 7% in a churn rate, that's awesome. That means you've got tremendous respect between the agents and the leadership. There's a really high level of connection. You're definitely going to have a churn rate. Nobody stays forever. Everyone's going to be leaving at some point. So that's going to vary. I'm going to do an asterisk right here on that churn rate percentage benchmark I just shared with everybody. You want to average your 24 months. So take your last 12 months and 13 to 24 months and then average them out, because some years you'll have, a whole team will leave or something will happen or so change will take place. You'll make a change in your brokerage, you'll lose something. So you want to do an average and then see how you're performing in the benchmarks I just shared. And then that'll be for you to then introspect and say, okay, why am I losing so many people?
Yeah. And by the way, we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago about some growth metrics for brokerages and the ROI there. And we did a poll asking everybody what their attrition rates were on there, and we stratified it. And the average was 15% for everybody on the call. And there were definitely some that were under 10 and some that were 20ish and some that were up kind of in the 20s. But yeah, I would, anybody that's kind of at that, above that 15%, that's definitely somewhere you want to focus, right? Because the best offense is a defense, right? It's like in, I love to use sports analogies, but in football, right? Like the defense wins Super Bowls, right? It's not the offense.
Yeah, I said I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I grew up through the 70s and 80s too, where they won all the Super Bowls, and I played football through college in defense. So I agree with that statement. You're so right. Sometimes you have great recruiters, but they're losing 25, 30% churn rate or disassociation rate coming through the other side. So it's like people are walking in the front door and people are walking right out the back door. So retention is re-recruiting. I completely agree. You've got to re-recruit your agents. Recruiting is, I would say your 5 jobs as a leader are recruit, retain, which is re-recruit, and then listings. Get your listings, get them on the market, get them sold in a timely fashion.
Yeah. Well, and it's very similar. I mean, obviously I'm in a software company and it's a subscription business, which has really flipped a lot of businesses on their head, because, you used to sell software and you were done selling it. But like with a subscription business, you're not. Every interaction you are selling them to keep using it. And as a broker, every interaction with your agent is basically reselling them or re-recruiting them to stay engaged and keep at it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too in that churn rate, and we'll get into, because when you scale your business and in growth, there are a few things that you should be doing. And that's the challenge, because someone who grows has a really good business, good team, decides great, I can do it myself. I'm an independent thinker, game changer, whatever. I'm going to go run my own brokerage. And then you start their own business and they hit a 10, 15, 20 agent number, and then they're pulled in all different directions. It's not like when they had a team of 5 or 10. Now they've got 20 and 30 people, and they're all asking questions. They're getting pulled in directions. Their personal business is going down. And now we call that the valley of death. The valley of death. And the valley of death is where you have to have momentum to get through there. And there's reasons and strategies you need to have to get through that, where you come on the other side, where you get to 50 and 60 and 70 agents, where you have a nice running population of people. Because, 50 agents, you probably have 20 that are selling houses, 30, 25, 30 that are actively selling a nice percentage of homes. And you have bottom 50% or bottom 2 quartiles, your third and your fourth quartile. Your fourth are probably not doing any transactions. They're either new coming in and going up, or they're going out and not doing anything. And your third quartile vary, whether they're going up or down or going, out themselves. So it's a constant churn. So you have to look at that valley of death and say, okay, but that's where the leader, the executive, doesn't really know that process and strategy to get through that. These steps will help them that I just highlighted. Those 3 foundational steps will really help you. The next 4 areas for growth that we work through, and we encourage you to do this, is brand. A lot of organizations, no matter they're a franchise or they're an independent or they're a team, know your brand. We dive into Carl Jung's brand archetypes. There's 12 specific archetypes, and it's fascinating information that actually will work on the leadership level, but also for the agents. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like Harley Davidson is an outlaw brand. There's also like Geico and Liberty Mutual. They're a jester brand. So you see like Geico trying to be an outlaw brand. They put themselves in that lane and they stay in that lane. The Wall Street Journal is a Sage brand. All right. They are all about knowledge, conveying information, things along those lines. Rolex is all about the Royal brand, right? So they're not going to be a jester and outlaw. They stay in that place. So a lot of organizations, they're jumping all over the map. One day I'm going to be an outlaw, the next day I'm on this, and it's just like schizophrenic. And they don't know who they are, and it's not resonating to the outside toward a recruiting. So you're actually better off to stay in your lane. And we work with organizations. It's good to know your primary and a secondary archetype, and then you could stay in those lanes consistently and communicate. And people won't come to you because maybe they're an outlaw and maybe you become the girl guy next door, for example, which a lot of real estate companies fall into that girl guy next door kind of space archetype. But they're just going to know it and resonate. It's not going to keep them from joining that organization. Actually, they'll join at a higher percentage because they know you're not schizophrenic. You're in your lane, and they understand it very clearly. So that's brand. And then we move into two areas, and we encourage you on the recruiting front. And Jim, this is where you hit the home run with Brokerkit and Analytics and things. So the first area here, and as you guys know, we've now gone through 4 key areas of your business. And if you think of a ladder with 10 rungs on it, each one of the areas I just explained to you, like audit your business 24 months. If you're not doing that, you're on rung 1, for example. Let's get you up to rung 4 or 5, right? Where you're looking at your financials, you put your expenses into 6 buckets, you're seeing your benchmarks and how you're performing, you're proactively going. Competitive assessment, I've really not done a competitive assessment. So you're on rung 1. Maybe you do a competitive assessment. You're on rung 4 or 5 or 6, depending on where you are. And then we strategic intent. How clear of a vision do you have of your future? Where are you on that ladder? And then in that other one, when we get into brand, how well are you amplifying your brand message? You might be a strong marketer as an executive. And so at that point, you're like, I'm feeling really confident. I'm on rung 7, I'm on rung 8, things like that. Awesome. Rung 9, now you're ready to recruit. All right. So let's think about what are those key personas, or also avatar, which really puts everybody in the movie. So I kind of stay with personas. What are those key personas that you would love to, if you could clone agents that are in your current organization or in your current market that you'd love to have? What are their wants? What are their needs as agents, as personas? And then what do you have in the form of tools, systems, and support to help those agents in that persona? And one, it'll highlight potential gaps that you have. And the second thing it'll do, it'll allow you to create a value proposition for that agent where you really be able to highlight those areas that are specific to that persona. And I'll give you a couple examples, like new Nicole or new Nick, right? Like a new agent to the business, right? What are their wants? They need everything, right? They need leads, they need training, they need support. They're just babies in the business. So what do you have in the way to support that person? This goes to onboarding. So what do you have to support them, get them onboarded? Do you have a fast start? Do you have a mentor program? Things along those things. Now you also might have like second career Sam, all right? Someone who's switching from a career, kind of moving themselves out into real estate. So they're going to kind of start part-time and move into, I should have said part-time. I'm completely against part-time and full-time terminology because you have some full-time agents that do no business and you have part-time agents that do a ton of business. So really, I think you should rate your agents by their production and do it only that way, and don't get rid of the part-time, full-time label. And that ties into recruiting, because we have some people say, I'm not going to hire part-time people. Right. And I'm like, well, if they sold 10 houses a year or 20 houses a year and they did it professionally and ethically, would you take them? So you have to weigh that. And I know some people might push back on that thinking, but it's a thought.
Well, it's all about results over effort, right? I mean, like, do you really want to hire people that try to do things the hard way, right? I mean, people that are especially effective, it's okay if they're not working, an insane number of hours and they get it done.
Yeah. I had so many rookies of the year through that 10 years I worked with Weichert, Long and Foster, rookies of the year that were part-time agents that worked at a bank, couldn't do anything business hours, from whatever time, 8 to 2:30 or 3, but they had a tremendous amount of family and friends, and they sold a ton of houses. People came to them, they loved them, they trusted them. There's a level of competence that felt, confidence that came, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so. And honestly, one of the traits I've really noticed with the top salespeople in any industry, including real estate, are, how they pick to choose what they choose to spend their time on and how they prioritize. And things that are not highly qualified, they tend to not spend time on, right? They don't kind of grind it out and do it the hard way and put an equal effort on everything. It's like, laser focused on the things that matter,
That's
right?
right. That's right. So on the personas, and we also have, like I said, Second Career Sam, we got new Nick and Nicole. You have a new one. I love this one. It's Sunset Sally. You might have some people who are looking to sunset out of the business. The business was so good in the last couple of years. They just said, hey, I'm going to push off my retirement another year. And now here comes this challenging more market where units are coming off a little bit. It's a little harder. And so they'll miss that window, for example. It's a great time to be approaching those agents to see about moving them over to support. So that's all right. What are their wants? What are their needs? They need a plan to transition out of that business and help support that process where they have a revenue stream over a period of time. So that's more of an acquisition, merger, acquisition kind of a thing. So that's something to think about as well. Or that's a persona. And then you think about what could you do in the way of communicating that out, and then what are the systems, tools, and support you have to help that. So that's the personas. And then we go into recruiting, which really ties into the top of the funnel, recruiting funnel, all the way through the process of what you do, what you say, when do you say it, to help you connect with people on a human level, on a basic level, where their wall comes down and they feel you and see you as a very compatible business partner that they would enjoy working with. And that all goes down through the process through affiliation and then the onboarding process. And that is a key step for everything, that you get people up and running successfully, but you're proactively, we call them spinning plates. I encourage everyone to have 5 areas of focus. And if you think of a spinning plate like the circus, and if you're not spinning it, you're not focused, it falls and it breaks. So the idea is you can't set it and forget it, right? It's not a Foreman grill. So you've got to spin it. You've got to stay focused on it. You've got to be bringing these prospective agents in, whether they're new to the business or experienced, depending on your personas, and you bring them in and then bring them through a process. What do you say when you first talk to them or they reach out to you? What's that dialogue? How do you separate yourself? What's that first interview, that first face-to-face meeting? What's your agenda? What do you go through? Have you systemized it where you can perfect it? What's that second interview, that business planning interview? How do you separate yourself? How do you convey value? And then what is your value proposition? And then talking about affiliation, and then the onboarding process. How do you get people up and running? Because as we know, that first 10 days, 2 weeks is critical, where a lot of people start knowing, hey, this agent left and went somewhere else, and people reach out. How's it going? Or if it's a new agent came out of a class, they were in that class with other people and they're saying, hey, where'd you go? How's it going? Right? And that's where they say, hey, it's awesome. I feel like these guys are taking great care of me, and so on and so forth. So that's that module there. So it's recruiting, personas, recruiting process, the whole interview track. And then we go into goal setting, talk about, okay, now let's review your financials. We're 6 months into it. How are you performing? And then let's look at 9 specific areas of things that you could do to tweak your performance, and what would be the impact to your bottom line profitability in each of those areas. And then you decide and pin your ears back, all right, I'm going to implement this change, or I'm going to go after this or that. And that's the goal setting exercise, which is kind of ties right into strategic intent that we did in module 3 in this area. And that is the 4 areas for growth, which then launch you into scale. Now you're ready to scale your business. The first in that area is really looking at company-generated business. The teams have showed us there's a tremendous amount of wealth that could be derived from lead generation and working with agents to help create a lead generation system. So brokerages, the idea of having company-generated business is extremely important as a separate division or revenue stream. And teams have proven, this is when I talked earlier about the return on revenue profit numbers for teams is, what is it? 3 times as high. It's in the high 20s as a percentage green for someone performing as a team versus a brokerage. So that's now brokerages could have a team mindset with a company generated business arm. All right. And how does that run? It's different than brokerage. And that's the challenge that brokers have, is how to implement one and run it effectively. And the teams, they just stay in their lane. They do extremely successfully. Some go out of their lane and decide they want to start bringing in agents, independent agents out of the team. And that's a business decision. That's something that needs to really be thought about and discussed, because now you're getting more vanilla compared to Rocky Road or whatever it might be. So you really have to think about that process. And both have been very successful, but there's a process of thinking that needs to take place. So that's all generated business, company generated business. And how do you curtail that? How do you support that? How do you amplify that? And then we dive into hiring. Now we're talking about hiring staff. not agents. Not We're talking about recruiting. We're talking about hiring. So you're scaling your business, and the key to scaling your business is you can only do so much. You only have 24 hours in a day. You need to find and surround yourself with talented people. So you need to really highlight the organization chart, understand what is the specific roles that you need to help support that growth. What are their job descriptions? And you mentioned this earlier, Jim. What are the key performance indicators, KPIs, for each of those jobs, so you can keep people focused on what they should be doing to help generate the best results? And the last area here is
Can I jump in just with a comment? Because this is, I want to really emphasize the point you just made about having the proper support staff. So, I mean, you talked about growing a business, recruiting is kind of one of the higher priorities out there. Well, it takes time, right? So yes. on our webinar we did about a month ago, we one of the polls we also took is how many hours does it take on average to recruit an agent? Yeah. And the average is about 15. Okay. Yeah. But it ranged, right? Depending on probably the scale of the brokerage and how sophisticated they are in their experience and the people involved, right? Yep. And it went from, I don't know, somewhere between like 5 and 10 hours to, up to the 20 plus. And it probably, it differs by new agents versus experienced agents, but it takes time. And one of the things we consistently see is people that are really still working in the business versus on the business that are getting started, and they view adding support staff as a cost versus an investment. Yeah. And right, if you you need to be recruiting and it needs to be a focus, and it takes 15 average hours for every recruit, one of the best things you can do is bring in someone to help you with that. Mm-hmm. Because it's going to be a very high leverage investment with a very high impact. And if you're caught in, I don't have time to do it because I'm selling, right? Or I'm afraid to take the risk of that because, it's a cost. It really is an investment. And that's something that is one of the highest leverage things that you can do as a broker owner out there.
Yep. Yeah, ROI is so important. So many successful entrepreneurs, leaders, broker owners that we work with, team leaders, they look at any investment they make, whether it's lead generation, whether it's an employee, whether it's bringing an agent, what's their ROI? What is the return that I'm going to get for this? And so to your point, it's not like an expense. If I bring on somebody who's going to help recruit and drive agents to me who are going to do production, on average, our per person productivity is 10, 12, 8, 4, whatever it is. What do I need to do number-wise to offset that investment? So if I pay them Y, how many agents do I need? How many units do I need to offset that investment? And what would be a return if I end up making more than that? And so you can lay that out to this person that you're recruiting, for example, as a KPI. I'm investing this much money to bring you on to do this role. And so we're going to need this many agents at looking at the company dollar generated from their sales to do this many units, so on and so forth. So you can break that down that way. And I like that thinking because it puts it right front and center to that agent, to that person, whether it's an agent or an employee, the employee you brought in this example, here's what we're focused on. Here's the return for that investment. So I completely agree with you 100% on that mindset.
Yeah. Well, and I hear, like very frequently, sounds great, but I don't have time. Yeah. But when you really think about it and you kind of run the numbers, there's almost nothing with a higher ROI that you could be doing. Right. And really you need to figure out a way to prioritize it. And if you don't personally have the time, make that investment to grow your business.
There's tremendous, there's one thing we share with clients early on in our process that I'm sharing with everybody on this podcast, these 10 steps. We share on early on because a lot of people are taking on responsibilities and jobs that aren't theirs. Mm-hmm. So leaders are taking on because there's a sense of I'm supporting my agents, I'm supporting my team member if I do this, this, and this for them. And really, this is like, you think of like, it's a terrible analogy, but you think of kids and adults, you really want to have adults. You work with adults and they're not having a bunch of kids running around where you have to constantly support them and help them and make them sandwiches for lunch and everything. Let people do things for themselves. So in this kind of comparison is you want to get some we call monkeys. You want to get these monkeys. People walk in your office as an example or contact you, say, hey, listen, I have this issue. And what they're doing is they're trying to give it to you. And you're a big-hearted person. You're one who gets things done. So you're like, hey, give it to me. I'll take care of it. I'll get back to you, right? And then you have your subordinate, your agent underneath you coming to you every day, every hour and say, hey, where are you on that? Where are you on that? Well, where are you on that? So one of the keys to this is really to your point, Jim, a lot of people just have to have the strategies, right? It's like dialogues. When someone says something, it says, and you have a dialogue that you can come and turn that and move past that little, that little a speed bump, that little pothole that maybe a client threw at your way or potential client threw at your way, like a potential recruit. If you have the ability to overcome that very quickly with a very concise statement and then move on and move past that, that's a critical step and to success. Same thing with as a leader. The problem is they get a leader and they got there because they were doers. They get stuff done. And the problem I found in my personal career is when I moved in the management chair and I had 20 agents and I grew that to over 100 agents, I couldn't do everything at 100 agents that I did at 20. And so I had to change, or I wouldn't have gotten to 100 agents. I wouldn't be able to hit those marks. And so some of that, and I learned that through the consultant we work with, frankly, is like, here are the things you need to offset some of these. You need to delegate things off of your plate. And it's hard for people because they're control freaks. We're all control freaks. And the idea is, I don't want to give away my control. I do this really well. People appreciate what I do for them. But frankly, you have to think of your time. Is my time best spent doing that task? Or is it better for that person to do that task, learn it for themselves? And then frankly, I'm going to do these better growth areas like recruit and bring in people and grow my per person productivity and increase my average sales price and do the things that frankly executives should be focused on and not some of those ministerial tasks that frankly should be delegated or left on somebody else's plate.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. And the last area, just to round this out, is the 10th area, and that is accomplishment marketing. One of the things that you want to do after all this work on your business is, and we work on 7 specific key areas, amplify your message to your market. How are you amplifying who you are to your market on a consistent basis? And then also to the agents in your market you'd love to recruit, those personas that you'd love to bring in, and also to your current agent population for retention purposes. So accomplishment marketing, and that rounds out those 10 steps that we walk through leaders through a process to make sure they have a full rounded business. And every single one of those ladders, those rungs, you have moved up 1, 2, 3 rungs, but you clearly see where those other rungs are now, and you can work on those and continue to progress over time.
Very good. Well, Dean, that was an excellent framework. I think that was gold for the listeners. There's, a lot of detail behind all of those. For folks, I really appreciate you taking the time. This is something, folks, you might want to listen to more than once because there was a lot of wisdom in there. Now, for the people that are interested in hearing more about, kind of that framework and, your kind of program, where would they find you online?
Great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the call with you. My email, if you want to email directly to me, is dean@t360.com. So that's the best way to reach me. And then where you can find information and layout of these 10 steps is going to be at T3, so the letter T, the number 3, T3 Fellows, FELLOWS. So T3Fellows.com. And that'll give you a complete overview of the 10 areas I just talked about. So it could be a good reminder for you as you work on this yourself, potentially. And we also have some testimonial videos and a bunch of other stuff. So I encourage you to go take a look at that, work on those key areas. If you need some support from some organization like T3, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Well, Dean, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in again. We hope you'll be back for our next episode on ramping up your real estate business via a strong talent funnel. You've heard a lot of wisdom from Dean today. Please, kind of pick out a couple things and try to apply them in your business. This one is very rich with details, so you might want to listen to this, a couple times at least. And of course, if you want to hear more, do reach out to Dean. Thanks so much, Dean, and to all the listeners, have a great day.